Welcome to the Rainmaker Multiplier on Demand, a podcast for leading financial professionals, or rainmakers, and their teams that offer support for securing a successful future. From marketing help to staffing structure, listen and subscribe for actionable insights from advisors and skilled professionals alike.
Good morning, C2P. It is 8 a.m. on the West Coast, 11 a.m. on the East Coast, and everything in between in the middle. Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to have Kellan Brown with us. She and I were chatting because 3 years ago in March, we actually met at the Longevity and Retirement Summit. And just to make a long story short, there was red wine and a tomahawk, and from there we were bestest of friends. So it was a phenomenal conference, and I got a great mentor and friend out of it by meeting with Kellan. Now, Kellan Brown is the COO and CDO, or Chief Distribution Officer, of 100 Women in Finance, guiding a global network of over 35,000 members across 33 locations. I'm proud to be a member. She has held roles at Income Lab, Primeco, and Finance of America Reserve, which most people at C2P recognize her from, where she has led major growth, mentorship, and just really great organizations. Kellan is a celebrated leader, recognized for her impact on innovation, mentorship, and advancing women in finance. Welcome, Kellan. I'm so happy to have you here.
Kirsten, thank you so much for having me. C2P was one of my favorite organizations when I was with that FAR. Some of these spaces just bring back so many memories. So it's great to be here, excited to talk about all the things that have happened over the past few years and just enjoy.
Well, thank you so much. Today's topic, we're going to talk about operational excellence in a mission-driven organization. We all have purpose. We all have missions. We all have things we want to accomplish. But Kellan, you do a wonderful job of bringing people together, mentoring, and guiding. So you serve as both the COO and the CDO of 100 Women in Finance. How do you balance operational work with advancing the mission of gender equity in financial services?
Big question. So I'm going to make a quick correction, Kirsten, because no one gets this right. So in the nonprofit world, CDO is actually Chief Development Officer. And what does development mean? This is like a fancy, kinder way of saying Chief Revenue Officer. So I'm in charge of all of the fundraising. That's really what that is.
Thank you for correcting me. I've been in the insurance side for so long that it's in my head.
It is. And it varies wherever you land. But it's funny because I went in for the COO seat. And when they asked if I'd be willing to run the development side, I literally said, I'm like, you realize this is a job for two people, not for one. And they said, well, let's just see how it goes. And so game on, here we go. But the reason why I think that these work so well together is that when you're driving towards a specific goal, operations is mainly driven behind how are we going to raise revenue? Like every single time I sit down with a team member, that comes first to mind. So that's really where it starts. And for us, it's how can we make sure that we're raising enough revenue, having enough donors, building enough of a strategy to support all of these purpose-driven objectives to make sure that the organization is impacting the industry. So Kirsten, a little bit of background that some of the people know on this call, but nonprofit has always been really my side hustle. It was more of my way to give back. It filled my personal mission. We've done, the personal mission statement exercise, which really does talk about what you're driving towards in your life and how do you apply that into business. Well, I had the privilege of now living my personal mission as a career. So being able to serve women and help elevate them at each stage in their career has been the greatest gift that I was offered. And so that's why I've been so excited to merge the operational and the development side together, because at the end of the day, if not everyone is driving towards raising the bottom line, it's going to make life very difficult. So I think that's why people love bringing operations and revenue and development together.
I love that. Kellan and I actually went through that exercise together, creating your own purpose, creating your own mission statement. It was a phenomenal exercise to hone you in and get focused. So if you haven't done it, I would encourage you to work with someone to do so. That being said, Kellan, what strategies have helped you successfully scale a global organization while staying aligned with your core purpose? And I love your core purpose. And how can other leaders do the same thing?
Yeah. So not one size fits all. And I think we all know that, right? And when I say that, I don't just mean people or organizations or even firms. It's really coming in and understanding how everyone works together and how we can advance. So, what I mean by that is in a global world, this is the first time that I've really had to understand the nuances of what's going on globally. So, as we all know, we had a changeover in Washington in January. Good things, different things, interesting challenges, especially when it comes to advancing women. We had the executive order come in on the DEI front. As you can imagine, in the United States, that was a big shift in understanding of how we're going to message our purpose. Now, I understand what he's doing. But on the other side of the pond, which half my team is in London, they're looking at the United States. It's like, well, what are you doing? And for those of you that don't know, in Paris specifically, or some of those other countries, they require to have a equal gender representation in their firms. If you don't have them, they're actually fined. So you can imagine as you're moving into an organization and then all of a sudden you're recognizing these nuances that are different globally. That is where like pivots, adjustments, being open to ideas and being willing to adjust your strategy in one specific location to be okay with a different one, right? Like my value proposition for my global corporate sponsors in Europe is significantly different than it is in the United States. So when we talk about serving our clients, is it the same offering? Is it a different approach? Those are the type of things that I always encourage my team to adapt to. And so much of that is just making sure we're listening to what's important to them.
I love that because you have to set the table for the audience that you're serving. You're not necessarily changing your purpose or what you're doing, but you're catering what you're doing to your demographics. And that's so important for growth. I can't
Exactly.
imagine feeling that the only way to do things with when we're working with an English based company, an American based company, or a Brazilian company, that everybody has the same focus. So I love that for what you do and what we do in this industry. What are some of your best practices for making sure that growth initiatives stay closely tied to the organization's mission and values?
Yeah. So I'll go back to making sure that you have very, very clear objectives. And again, it all has to tie back to them. I am a big believer in technology. I come out of business development. CRM is my best friend as much as I don't like using it. At the end of the day, it's a data-driven decision. So making sure we're entering in the relationships, tying back to the objective, doing quarterly business reviews, doing annual business reviews. But there's a caveat to that. You can do all of the data entry, you can analyze every single thing and say, okay, this is what's driving it. And that will get you very far. But what will get you the furthest and make you the most successful is making sure that you foster those relationships, you're your true authentic self, and not trying to copy somebody else. At the end of the day, like Greg, you show up so authentic. Every time I see you, I know exactly what I'm going to get. And it's because that is who he is. And I lean into that so much because if you're trying to show up something different or mirror a strategy of yourself, your personal self, it's not going to work. So I just say, like, anytime you build those processes, stay true to the objectives, follow that internally, great, because that means you're all rowing in the same direction. But when it comes up for yourself to actually advance relationships and move the actual, on the biz dev side, that forward selling up, it has to be true to who you are and know when you should pivot to give it to somebody else because they would collaborate better with someone else on your team.
Authenticity is key to relationships. Authenticity is key to growing the business. But I love the fact, because I am a CRM nerd, that you are encouraging people to use their CRMs and use it for the good of the cause. Because at the end of the day, data is only as good as what you put in and what you use it for. And if you're not leveraging the data and you're not using the information to build and foster relationships to grow the business, you're doing it wrong, right?
Yeah. So, Kirsten, let me ask this question of everybody on this call because we've got a lot of strong leaders here. I recently was at a YPO event and somebody said to me, they're like, the majority of your line item for salaries, you should be putting 20% of that line item into your top performers and then let the rest of them rotate through. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh man, that is not, I'm not sure how I feel about that culture concept. But ultimately, those top performers are really what are doing the majority of the work. So the 80-20 rule, applying that thing to your employees. And so I start to go through this. Every single one of us is replaceable at the end of the day, right? If we're able to automate that group of people that you're teaching how to move through organizations, whether you give them everything in the world, they're likely going to move on anyway. So it's building a culture where people grow, advance, all of the above, and you're giving them the tools to be successful, but then actually letting them fly and bringing new, younger blood in. So you're not exhausting that line item of actual salaries. And it seems to be working for what I have seen. So I want to throw that out to this group. Like, how does everyone feel about top performers' salaries? What are you guys seeing on turnover? What does that look like for you with this new generation?
I think when we put our time, effort, as well as money into people, we have better results.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. It's just interesting how much movement we have seen and how much movement it's the greatest opportunity to increase salary as you're moving through your employment track.
I love that. The front stage does not operate without the backstage. For our advisors to be successful, they need strong, helpful people on the backstage. So that way you can give your clients the ultimate satisfaction and gold star service. Can you share some more of your tactics when engaging and retaining volunteers, whether it's volunteers or employees, ambassadors, or partners across the network? Because I think it's important to engage to see that full potential.
Yeah. So a little bit of background on 100 Women in Finance, because this will help understand how broad we are. So we have about 36,000 members now across the globe, a staff of 17, and I have volunteers of about 600. And what I mean by that, those volunteers, yes, include our mentors, include our Global Fund Women Initiative, include our Impact Investing Symposium, include our Leadership Trap, our 100 Women in FinTech. And then we have, of our 33 locations globally, we have committees stationed at each area. So each one of those is volunteering their time to help advance our purpose. Some of the tactics, some of the purpose-driven initiatives we do to make sure people stay engaged. One, it's making sure they feel and see the results of what they've done. So we really concentrate specifically on each location of where their successes are. And then we have built what we call our volunteer handbook. Sounds very simple, not like an employee handbook, right? This is what we want to see achieve, and here's how we're going to bring in the next group. So we have terms similar to a board where we'd have people sit on for 3 years. They'd foster the next group of women coming in. And what that does for their career is the visibility and access to our network is so large and opportunistic that people want to be a part of it because it's so healthy for their career, their resume, and their actual growth. So I think that's really important, making sure that you recognize the opportunity of being a volunteer to make sure it actually advances their success in their career.
Thank you. What does it take? Because I love this question because I do feel like you might be a disruptor. You're changing the narrative. You're driving so many great initiatives. What does it take to be a disruptor in a purpose-led organization? And how can others apply that mindset to drive meaningful change? Because at the end of the day, we all want to grow with the organization that we're at and provide value.
Yeah. So when I had a mentor that once said to me, what's your personal brand? I was like, my personal brand. Okay, this is interesting. I think we can all probably describe our organization's personal brand. We all know our mission, our vision, our values. But have we ever done the exercise for ourselves? It's a lot easier to stay true to who you are if you know exactly what that is. Writing it down, understanding your mission statement, understanding your personal values, and not apologizing for them, really leaning into them and being okay with that. So, Kirsten, to your point, when someone had asked me this question, it was actually after I built all those mentorship programs and had been put on, been featured a number of times to talk about the value of mentorship. That became so much a part of my personal brand. And what they said to me was, if you don't define it, somebody else will, good or bad. And I was fortunate to know that, okay, I can take this mentorship thing and advance it so much on the nonprofit side that ultimately has now landed me, my career of my dreams. And what I would say to people is try to figure out what that is and don't apologize for it. If you're a disruptor because of it, you are going to be celebrated more than ridiculed, in my opinion. You will find that group of people that will be 100% behind you. And it's okay. You're not going like, I love the concept of like, we want to build these relationships and make sure everything works. And we're advancing that. Sometimes those relationships don't work, and that is okay. So really leaning into the people that are behind your mission and your effort. And even if you throw initiatives out there, like right now, it's so funny. I was up at the Milken Institute conference in Los Angeles Tuesday and Monday. And we were talking a lot about, the executive order. How is this impacting you? You're a women's led organization. And I'm like, it's not going to impact me. I'm going to see people come out of the woodwork that really believe in what we're doing. And I'm going to capitalize on that with them. And by the way, we encourage men to join our organization because those are the allies that bring us up to another level. And we want that. So I think that's the piece I have is disruption comes no matter what, whether you choose to be a part of it or stay behind the curtain, that's your choice. But if you know who you are and what matters to you and you apply that into work, you're going to get that label no matter what. And I encourage it all day long.
Kellan, you know what I'm going to ask you now? Because I'm getting the question. What is your purpose? Will you share your purpose?
Yes. Okay. So I'll give you my personal mission, which is to be the strongest mentor and work in life so that I can impact anyone that walks into my circle so they can overcome their greatest fears and then pay it forward.
I celebrate you, Kellan, because you do live that, and I love that for you. And I've never seen you stray from that mission. So I celebrate you for staying strong to who you are, especially during a time where it's a little uncertain. I do believe that everyone needs to take the time to know who they are, what they want, and define their path. Because when you're bobbing in the ocean, you're just a buoy. But when you're an anchor, you're steady. So I love that. So thank you for sharing that. How can leaders build scalable systems and processes without losing the human touch or diluting their mission?
So scalable systems, I will ultimately always go back to technology. I think that is the safest way to do it because then it is all driven by the data and you know what's working and what's not. Okay, we've got a number of leaders of advisory firms on this. So I would just say when it comes to business development, how many channels of sales do you have working to support growing the organization? I have committees that are specifically targeting partnership associations and then pivoting because of what's happening in the United States with the landscape. We have a specific committee going out to determine if there are organizations that we can acquire because they don't have the proper systems in place or messaging or development support to be able to survive, what's being required. Those types of things. Or on the biz dev front, like if you're going directly and targeting those, for us, we have banks, we have asset managers, we have our legal teams. What's your value proposition specific to those groups of people? It's how many lines do we have functioning at the same time? And then I would always just say, I come back and reevaluate, like, what are we missing? So that line, that sales line, that vertical that I just talked about like acquisition side of other organizations so we can grow our membership. Because we have global corporate sponsors, we have membership dues, we have our specific donors, and then we have our gala revenue. Like, how are we supporting each one of those efforts to bring in additional revenue? And so just making sure that you're evaluating that you're still seeing percentage growth on each one of those channels. That's what I say is the smartest thing that you can do and not be afraid to just test the water, even if you do fail.
As we're wrapping up our time together, Kellan, it always goes so fast. I have one last question for you. What advice would you give someone building an operations team from scratch in a purpose-driven organization?
Yeah. So a lot of for the nonprofit side, a lot is asked for free. And there are moments where saying no is often more important than saying yes. So when it comes to purpose-driven organizations, making sure you know what's going to have the biggest impact and defining clearly what is expected of everyone on your team. Because as I moved into this org, there were not really clearly defined responsibilities and roles for each individual, which made them feel like they were floundering. And when you have people feeling that way, you're not going to be moving in the same direction to achieve that purpose driven goal. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice is to make sure everyone feels and can own what's their responsibility, knowing when it's too much and being able to say, I mean, this morning I had a woman say to me, Kellan, I don't think we can do this event in Berlin and pull it off in 4 weeks. I'm like, okay, I'll take it. Let's understand why and see if we can hand this off to another association that can benefit from this because we have the same cause. So really understanding that, owning that, and supporting your people.
What I'm hearing is that sometimes it's okay to say no. Sometimes saying no is saying yes to something greater. And we can't be all things to all people. So if you haven't defined your roles, you've defined your mission, you're going to be floundering. But if you can define your mission, define your roles, and learn the art of saying no while giving yourself a yes, you're going to see more success. So, Kellan, thank you for being here. Everybody on today, take care.
Thanks for tuning in. This podcast was brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Never miss an episode by subscribing now to discover new resources and strategies. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help scale and secure your business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.